Morning, everyone. So the agenda for the class today is to just go over for you to expect for the module, as well as to show you exactly where to get the material as well. So when it comes to the module for Fin4801, you see that between now until end of October, the plan is that we're going to be going through the study units, which is basically the chapters for the textbook. And you'll see that when it comes to the chapters for the textbook, you are going to be having 17 chapters that you are supposed to be going through in the textbook. And those 17 chapters, they are basically in sequence from chapters 1 to chapter 17 as well. Now, when you look at these chapters going through the textbook, you will see that the first 8 chapters of the textbook for Fin4801, the assumption is that you are basically reviewing things that you should have done when you're doing your undergrad. So for those who are doing their undergrad, when they did Fin4801 and they did Fin480, sorry, when they did Fin2601, Fin3701, and Fin3702, those are the same concepts that they are basically bringing again. So they are meant for students who are continuing to review, and then for students who have never done with NISA as well, don't have a financial management background, or from other modules as well, they can now be able to utilize that to actually prepare themselves. Then you start seeing that from chapters 9 going forward, that's when you are now going to be looking at more and more postgrad material. So expect that from chapters 1 to 8, there's not really that many new things that you're going to be looking at. And because of that, that's why you see that when you go through the videos, there are certain concepts that I don't even cover, mainly because there are certain concepts and certain variations. Like, for example, if you're going to be looking at ratios, there are certain variations of ratios that they also bring in there. We don't even worry much about them because the lecturer basically looks more at the basic ratios. Because remember, at postgrad level, they are no longer just examining you on knowing the answer. They are more concerned with you knowing the interpretation and analysis and making recommendations as well. So you see that your exam paper is going to be based more on not just doing calculations, but also being able to analyze and make recommendations. So when you look at those long questions in the exam, they always end up with you doing the analysis, and then after doing the calculations, you do the analysis, and then from doing the analysis then you make recommendations. And please take note as well that for Fin4801, your lecturer, I've always known him to be very hands-on, which means that even the assignments, he usually marks the assignments himself. The past exam, the question papers, the when it comes to the exams as well, the scripts, the last time I checked, he was marking those scripts by himself as well. So which means that his emphasis has always been make sure that you show as much of your working as possible. So in preparation, even when you go on to the exam as well, please make sure that when you do your calculations there, show as much of your working as possible. And remember, you also see that in the exam, if it's going to be a question which asks you to do the calculation and interpretation, you will see that if it's all put together, expect that a bit more of the mark allocation is going to be going towards what? Interpretation, and also making recommendations as well. Because the assumption is the calculation part, you've seen it so many times before when you're doing your undergrad, especially when it comes to the concepts of what? Ratios. Normally, when it comes to ratios, then which is financial statement analysis, they don't give you that much mark allocation to calculation because they're assuming that you already know how to do the calculations. They put a lot more mark allocation towards what? Interpretation and analysis. So between now until end of October, that's when we're going to be looking at the study units. Then November, December, January, until you write your exams in February, between end of January, beginning of February, somewhere there, you will see that that's when we're going to be concentrating on revision. And when we look at revision, we're going to be looking at the past papers and also the assignments as well, so that we're able to polish up on anything that need to be changed when it comes to what the assignments. Because remember, when you look at reviewing the assignments, we review the assignments based on the lecturer's what memo, so that we make sure that whatever our understanding is also according to what the lecturer needs us to be able to answer as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run down with you what to expect when it comes to the information in the textbook. But remember, in the videos, I always make sure that I explain the different chapters as well in detail. So I always explain the different chapters in detail, and I also give you an overview of the chapter as well. So what I'm going to do is just give you a guideline to say this is orientation of exactly what should you expect and how is going to be our schedule, and where do you get your information as well for the particular for this particular module. So is there any questions before we proceed to looking at what to expect when it comes to the different chapters?
No, we sorted.
All right. So when it comes to the different chapters, please note that for Fin4801, you are going to be looking at so you're going to be looking at 17 chapters. And remember what I said, the first 8 chapters of Fin4801, the assumption is you are revising things that you've seen already before when you're doing your undergrad. So you will see that the overview of financial management, the assumption is that you would have done it in your second year of financial management. Chapter 2, time value of money, you would have done it in the second year of financial management when you're doing financial management as well. Risk and return concept, portfolio management, financial statement analysis, valuations, financial statement analysis. These first 5, the assumption is you would have done them when you're doing Fin2601, which is basically your second year when you're doing financial management. So that's basically the review that they're expecting when it comes to the first 5 chapters of the textbook. Then there's also chapter 6, which looks at valuations. Now, chapter 6, which looks at valuations, you will see that it's also referring back to things that you would have done when you're doing a second year of financial management, and some of the things that you would have done when you're doing a third year as well. Then there's the cost of capital chapter and the capital budgeting chapter. You will see that these 2 chapters, you are expected to, the assumption is that you would have looked at these chapters when you were doing your third year of financial management, which is Fin3701. So you will see that from chapters 1 to chapter 8, the assumption is you've seen these material before when you're doing Fin2601 and 3701, if you're doing with UNISA. But even when you're doing with other institutions as well, the assumption is that you should have covered this when you're doing when you were doing your undergrad as well. But even if you didn't do it, please note that even if you didn't do it, you see that when the way we cover this material in the different chapters as well, we try as much as possible to look at it from an in-depth analysis as well. Now, please take note that when it comes, remember, time value of money, when you do chapter 2, which is time value of money, it's just like what you did with time value of money when you're doing your undergrad. And please note that there are 2 calculators which are commonly used, the HP10B2 and also the Sharp 738 calculator as well. So usually when we do the demonstrations of the calculations, if you check in the videos, we will show you the demonstrations of exactly how to use the HP10B2 and also the Sharp calculator as well. If you have other financial calculator that you have, please contact me so that I can guide you through so that you can see exactly how they synchronize when it comes to use of other financial calculators. But normally, the commonly accepted use of the calculators is going to be that Sharp 738 and also the HP 10B2 as well. So those are the two calculators that are usually recommended when it comes to financial management at UNISA as well. So please note that the analysis of these chapters in the textbook, we do when we go through the different chapters as well, we look at it quite in depth. We do look at it quite in depth. And when you go through the videos going through these chapters as well, my recommendation is when you're going to be going through chapters 1, try as much as possible to go through the video, and while you're going through the video, go through the textbook as well, just like you're in class. Reason being, remember I said that the assumption is that these chapters, you would have done them when you're doing your undergrad. So which means there are certain things that are covered in the textbook that the lecturer really doesn't really emphasize much, because the assumption is that you would not have done them in undergrad, or they were not emphasized when you're doing your undergrad as well. So try as much as possible to utilize the videos when you go through these chapters in the textbook as well, so that you don't end up spending so much of your time looking at things that the lecturer doesn't really emphasize much when it comes to preparation for your exam. So is there any question regarding the first 8 chapters, where we are saying that these chapters, the assumption is that you should have covered these chapters when you're doing your undergrad? Any questions?
No.
All right. When it comes to chapter 9, you see that, remember chapter 8, we look at capital budgeting. Now, when you look at capital budgeting when you're doing your undergrad, there is another element that you partially covered when you're doing your undergrad. Remember, the basic assumption is that when you're comparing two investments, you're comparing them using the same discount rate. You're comparing them assuming that they're running for the same period of time. Now, when you are now looking at chapter 9, when you're now looking at chapter 9, you are going to do a further analysis to say, we now need to acknowledge that the risk is not necessarily going to be the same when you're comparing investment A to investment B. And at the same time, we also need to acknowledge that the time horizon is not going to be the same when you're comparing investment A to investment B. So because of that, when you look at further issues in capital budgeting, these are some of the things that are going to be taken into account as well. And then you also take into account to see exactly, so what will be the expected net present value of a particular project if you are now going to be assuming, looking at what scenario analysis as well. So those are some of the things that you're going to be looking at when you're looking at chapter 9 as well. So which means chapter 9 is basically built up from chapter 8, because you're now looking at it from a higher level. You're now getting deeper and deeper when it comes to what understanding capital budgeting. You're now looking at it more on a postgrad level. Then when you also look at chapter 10 as well, capital budgeting risk analysis, is very much the same way. You're now saying, even from a risk analysis perspective as well, you are also going deeper and deeper as well. And when you look at chapter 10, this is also where you look at what decision trees, where you're now going to be saying, can you use decision trees to calculate the expected net present value, so that you're going to be assessing the acceptability of a particular project. Because we know that a project, when you're going to be considering going into a particular project, it's not all the time that the cash flows that you're going to be generating year 1, year 2, or year 3 are going to be exactly as planned. So with chapter 10, you're now looking at more towards what scenario analysis. You're now taking into account to say, so there's possibility that in the first year, this project is going to be generating a certain cash flow, and there's a possibility it's going to be generating a certain cash flow given the changes or possible what economic conditions, or in the second year was going to be generate another cash flow as well, which basically means that you are now going to be building up what a decision tree, which takes into account what the different scenarios as well and their probabilities, and from there you are going to be able to determine the expected net present value. So note that chapters 8, chapter 9, and chapter 10, you need to do them sequentially, reason being they are building up on top of each other as well, with chapter 8 being the foundation. Then chapter 11, you see that chapter 11 now looks at working capital. So which means in chapter 11, we are now looking more at analysis to say, so what makes up your working capital? Your working capital is made up of your current assets and current liabilities. So which means you are now looking at more in detail to say, so how do we manage what makes up your current assets and what makes up your current liabilities, and how do we manage this relationship between your current assets and current liabilities as well. And this chapter 11 is also linked to chapter 12, where you look at current asset and short-term financing. Reason being, when you are running a business, what you know with certainty is your liabilities, right? What you know with certainty is your liabilities, mainly because you know exactly who are you owing and when are you supposed to pay that obligation. But what you don't know with certainty is basically the money that is being owed to you. So when you look at what makes up your current assets, it's your cash, it's your inventory, it's your debtors. These are the three main current assets, although there are other current assets as well, but these are the three main current assets. Now, when you look at cash, it basically means that you need to be able to manage your cash for the business, because if you don't manage your cash for the business, that's when you're going to be running into liquidity problems. Hence, when you look at chapter 12, we're going to be looking at what? Cash budgets. The next current asset you're going to be looking at there is basically your debtors, right? And you need to be able to manage to see exactly, so how do we try to ensure that you're going to be able to manage your debtors to try to entice them to pay? So which means that this is where you're now going to be looking at what? Management of your debtors, to say, so how do we manage our debtors to try to ensure that we are able to get that money as soon as possible, because the sooner we get that money, the sooner we're able to meet our liabilities as well. Then we also have inventory. And then you're also going to check to see exactly how do we manage our inventory. So how do we order our inventory, so that, because remember, the last thing that any business wants is to be having inventory tied up, cash tied up in inventory. Because any business, ideally they want to say, if they buy a particular product or they produce a particular product, they want to be able to sell it as soon as possible. So which means that you now need to look at it from a perspective where you're saying, how do we ensure that we're able to manage our inventory so that it's not going to be cash tied up in what? In inventory as well. Then there's also short-term financing, in the sense that another issue that a business also has is where they need to now have a balance between getting short-term financing and getting long-term financing, because usually the difference between these sources of financing is mainly because long-term financing, they come in with what? Fixed obligations. Because if you get a long-term loan, it means that every period you have to pay that interest obligation as well, and you have to service that debt. But with short-term financing, this is where you're now looking at the difference between the conservative financing policy and the aggressive financing policy, where if you're going to be pursuing the aggressive financing policy with short-term financing, you are not going to be saying, I'm only borrowing money as and when we need it. But we know that there's also a risk of trying to get that money and not being able to get that money when you need what? To meet your obligations as well. So which means that this is where you are now looking at the interactions between your current assets and your current liability. But now we are now looking at them deeper now to say, so how do we understand management of our current assets? How do we look at management of what? Our short-term liabilities as well. Then chapter 13 and chapter 14, they are very much linked to each other. So chapter 13 looks at sources of finance. Remember, we're saying, when you look at sources of finance, we're basically saying your assets is equals to equity plus liability, which means if your assets equals to equity plus liability, we know that on the asset side, this is where you make your investment decisions. And on the equity and liability side, This is where you make your financing decisions. So which means I'm basically saying, for whatever investment that you want to invest in, how are we going to be financing it? So chapter 13 looks as the source of financing, where we're going to be saying, so what are the different sources of equity that we have available? What are the different sources of debt financing that we have available as well, so that you have a deeper understanding of those sorts of equity and liabilities. Now, after you look at these sorts of equity and liabilities, you also see that the value of your asset is basically your firm value. So the value of your assets is your firm value. And remember, we say the goal of the firm is to maximize shareholders' equity. So if the goal of the firm is to maximize shareholders' equity, we're now going to be saying these different sources of financing, they come with, for all these different sources of financing, they come with costs. And the goal is with every business to maximize the firm value, you want to minimize your cost as much as possible. Which means these two chapters are basically leading us on to the calculation of the weighted average cost of capital, where we say the weighted average cost of capital is given as the cost after tax cost of debt times weight of debt plus your cost of preference shares times weight of preference shares multiplied by the cost of equity multiplied by the weight of equity. So which means to maximize the firm value, we need to minimize this weighted average cost of capital. So which means to minimize this weighted average cost of capital, now the question becomes, how do we determine the ideal weight that we're going to be getting to finance these investments? What is going to be the financing coming from debt? What is going to be the financing coming from preference shares? What is going to be the financing coming from equity? And at the same time, we also need to determine to see exactly, so what is the average, what is going to be the overall cost of equity of debt for this? What is going to be the cost of preference shares that is available? And what is going to be the relevant cost of what? Of equity as well. So that we are able to check to see exactly our financing decisions should allow us to be in a situation where we're able to minimize our weighted average cost of capital. Because remember, we always say your firm value is going to be very much dependent on the what? On the cost of capital. So your firm value is always going to be very much dependent on the what? On your cost of capital. So the lower your cost of capital, the value, the more you're able to maximize the value of the firm, which is what? The goal of the firm as well. So you see that when they bring questions in the exam, chapters 13 and chapter 14, the lecturer allows to match them up together into one question, which is also linking on to the things that you have done from chapters 1 to 8 as well. So please take note of that in the exam. The lecturer never really brings in chapters 13 and chapter 14 independently. The lecturer allows to mash it up together into one question. And sometimes they even link it with capital budgeting as well. So in most of the times, there's also questions where they also link it to the capital budgeting, where with capital budgeting, you're now going to end up assessing to say, so should we invest in this particular project or should we not invest in the particular project? So that's chapter 13 and 14 of the textbook. Moving on to chapter 15. Chapter 15 looks at leases. So chapter 15 looks at leases. So what you need to take note of from leases is that normally what we do is that in the exam, there are two ways that the lecturer can bring you a question on leases. And the question on leases is guaranteed, it's always going to be there. And when they bring the question on leases, normally it carries between 10 to 15 marks of your exam. So the question on leases, it's guaranteed. I've never seen a past exam that the lecturer has never brought the question on leases. And for some reason, he indicated last time when I had a chat with him that he was indicating that somehow they are obligated to always ask a question on leases when they look at the structure of the exam. So because of that, there is no past paper that you can look at where the lecturer didn't bring a question on leases. So question on leases, chapter 15, always expected. The nice thing about the question on leases is that there are only two ways that the lecturer can bring you the question on leases. One where you do amortization, and one where you don't do amortization. Why you do amortization or you don't do amortization, I'll refer you to the video going through chapter 15 because it's very comprehensive. And what I did for that particular video is that there is a practice question that that are also made available as well. I'll also share it on the downloadable material as well, so that you also have that practice question, because that's the one that we always use. And on that particular practice question, that question was brought in as one of the, I think it was one of the previous assignments. But the nice thing about that is that it covers, it has part A and part B. And on those parts, one question you're doing amortization, the other question you're not doing amortization. Sorry, the first part, first question you're not doing amortization, and then the second part you're doing amortization. So which means that particular question that I always use for chapter 15 for demonstrative purposes there, I always like that particular question because it covers all the possible ways that the lecturer can bring that particular question in the exam as well. So that's what you can expect when it comes to the chapter on leases. The next chapter is chapter 16, which looks at dividends and share buybacks. So which means when a company makes profits, they can either choose to pay dividends, or they can do a share buybacks, right? So which means to compensate the investors, they can either pay the investors dividends, or they can do a buyback of the shares where the investors are now going to be given what, a certain portion, a certain amount of money for the investment that they have on a pro rata basis as well. So which means usually when the lecturer brings in this question in the exam, they usually, if it's brought in as a long question, they love to interchange. It's either they give you a question on dividends, where you look at the dividend policy, or they give you a question on share buybacks, unless they bring both concepts in the what, in the short questions. Usually the short questions, we find them in question number 1 of the exam paper. In question number 1 of the exam paper, that's where the lecturer brings in short questions. So if they bring it in short questions, that's when you can find the concept of dividends, policy, and share buybacks coming in together. But usually, if they bring it in as a longer format type of question, they usually ask one of the two.
Reynolds? Reynolds?
I think he's having a connection problem.
Oh,
Yeah.
All right, there was a the internet was down for a second, but I'm back on again. So I'm saying these are the 17 chapters that you should expect to encounter when you go through the curriculum. So for Fin4801, the idea is how we're going to structure it is that we are you are going to go through the videos for the first 8 chapters, then we're going to be having a class where I give you I'm going to give you practice questions before the way before the class, and then we review those 8 chapters, and then we're going to be, so during the revision class we're going to be reviewing those practice questions as well. So when you look at the timetable for Fin4801, you see that the timetable is already posted on the website. So the timetable is already posted on the website. And when it comes to the timetable, you see that for Fin4801, uh, we're going to be having a class on the 10th. And the idea behind the class on the 10th is because we want to be able to do the first quiz. We need to be able to review the question for the first quiz. And usually, when it comes to the questions for the first quiz, the questions are the same, but the sequencing of the questions are different from one individual to the next as well. So the questions are the same, but the sequencing of the questions is going to be different. So our schedule is that on the 10th, because remember, for Fin4801, we are going to be having 6 assignments that you're going to be doing. So there are 6 assignments that we need to make sure that we do together as well. So the first assignment is going to be on the 10th, and we're going to be having that assignment from 7 to 8 p.m. It's going to be during the week at night. Then the second assignment, we're going to be doing it on the 11th of May, and we're going to be doing it from 8 to 11. And then the third assignment, we're going to be doing it on the 15th of May, and it's going to be from 9 to 7. And then the fourth assignment, we're going to be doing it on the 10th of July, and it's going to be in the evening from 7 to 9 as well. Then on the 20th of July, that's when we're going to be having a class where we're going to be reviewing where we're going to be reviewing the curriculum as well. And when we review the curriculum, that's when we're going to be reviewing the first 8 chapters of the textbook. So it's going to be from 11 until 3 p.m. Then from there, we're going to be on the 17th of August, we're going to be looking at assignment 5, and it's going to be from 11 to 1 I think it's going to be on a Saturday. Then on the 18th of September, we're going to be looking at assignment 6, and it's going to be in the evening, 7 to 9. And then on the 12th of October, that's when we're going to be reviewing chapters 9 to 17, and it's going to be from 12:30 to 4:30 as well. Then during the revision period, we're going to be looking at the Jan-Feb 2024 paper, the May-June 2024 paper, and then we're going to be reviewing the 2024 assignments as well. Please note that the videos going through the previous question papers, they are already there, and the videos going through the previous assignments, they're also there, and also the question papers and the answers, they're also there as well. So the material is already there. Then we're also going to be scheduling discussion classes as well in December, depending on exactly how fast we move to finish the question papers and assignments as well. But we are still going to be scheduling discussion classes in December and also in January as well. But we're going to the revision timetable. I'll also give you the more detailed information as we are approaching what revision as well. That's when we're going to be able to share more details regarding exactly when are we meeting and what are we going to be covering as well. Are there any questions so far?
No.
All right. Then the next thing that I need to demonstrate to you today is how to access the material on the website. So the next thing that I need to be able to demonstrate to you is how to access the material on the website. So to access the material on the website, you need to be having a user account that you would have created. And then on the user account, that's when you're going to be able to log in so that you are able to access the material. So if you go onto the website, if you go onto the website, to access the material, to log into your user account, you click on student login. And then from there, you're going to put, remember, if you don't have a user account as yet, you need to create the user account by indicating your email, your preferred username, and also your preferred password. Then you click on register. Then in future, after you've already created a user account, that's when you can either, to log in, you can either indicate your email or you can indicate the username, and then you put your password, then you log in as well, and you'll be able to log in to access your material. So after you log in, that's when you will be able to, that's when you are going to be able to, on your dashboard, that's when your information is going to be indicating as well. So you see that after you log in on the dashboard, your information is going to be, the information on the modules that you are registered for is going to be indicating. And if you click on the module that you are registered for, you will see that on the first page is going to be the overview, which shows you exactly what material we're going to be using, and also how many chapters we're going to be covering as well. Then from there, you're now, if you click on curriculum, that's where you're going to be able to now access the videos going through the different chapters of the textbook as well. So you'll see that there are videos going through the different chapters of the textbook, which are covering chapters 1 all the way to chapter 17 as well. Which means to access the videos, all you have to simply do is click on the chapter, and then you click on the video that you want to be able to access. And you see that automatically the video shows on the right side there, and you're able to watch the video. Even to maximize the screen, you're able to maximize the screen as well. Then after the first 17 chapters of the textbook, you are able to access the material or you're able to download the soft copy of the textbook as well. So this is where you're able to download the soft copy of the textbook, because if you click on that tab, it will link you to the Google Drive. And on the Google Drive, you're able to access, you are now going to be able to choose the book that you want to be able to access. And for financial management, you're going to be able to download this particular textbook as well. So this is how you're going to be able to download that particular textbook as well. Then when we go through revision, once we start going through revision, to access the material for revision as well, you're going to be clicking on this particular tab which says Fin4801 material. So which means this material is basically the one that's going to be able to give you access to the revision material as well. And it also be a link which takes you to the Google Drive, and then you are able to access the material. And the material that you're going to be able to access there is basically the past question papers, the answers to the past question papers, the past assignments, and also the answers to the past assignments, as well as the lecturers' answers to the past assignments as well. Then after that, you are now going to be able to access the videos, and the videos that we have available are the videos going through the 2018 paper, and then the 2019 papers and assignments, and then the 2020 papers and assignments, 2021 papers and assignments, and then the 2022 papers and assignments, as well as the 2023 papers and assignments as well. The videos are there, and you're going to be able to access these videos. But remember, if you're not on the premium package or on the diamond package, it means that if you're going to be on the diamond package, it means that you're going to be able to access these videos from October onwards, because that's when we make them available as well. Are there any questions on how to access the material? Any questions?
Yeah, just one, Rainer. So you're saying, because I did try to access, so I could access from the videos, right? From 1 to 17, and then also with the study material, the textbook. And then from there on going forward, I was unable to actually access the links. Is it because it will
Yes,
only be
it's
accessible in
because,
October?
remember, if you're on the diamond package, you are paying your installment as and when you go, which means that what we do is that we make available the revision material from October onwards. So from October onwards, you see that these tabs are going to be opened up as well.
Okay, no, I get it.
And even the tab for the revision material as well, where you're able to download the past question papers and the past assignments as well, you will be able to access them in October as well.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? So my advice is, please try as much as possible to go through the material. And as you go through the textbook as well, anytime if you have something that you come across that you're finding difficult, please don't hesitate to contact me so that I'm able to assist you. I'm always available. If I'm not able to answer or respond to you, I'll always make sure that within 24 hours, I always respond to your query as well. So if there's anything that you come across that you're finding difficult, don't hesitate to contact me. Either just take a picture of what you're finding difficult, send me a picture on WhatsApp, and then I'll be able to respond. If I need to call you and explain further, I'm always willing to call you and explain further so that you have a better understanding as well. So as you go through the curriculum, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to wait until we start reviewing those chapters, the first 8 chapters. If you come across anything as you go through the material, please don't hesitate to contact me and I'll be able to give you, make sure that you also have all the information that you need and you are not lost as well. So my advice is try as much as possible to go through the textbook. And as you go through the textbook, try to use the guidelines of going through the video as well. Because remember, as you go through the video, it's more like you're in class. And you see that if you try to go through the textbook by yourself, what you usually, one thing that you might get stuck on is that there are some things or concepts which are covered in the textbook, which we don't really necessarily have to worry much about when it comes to Fin 4801. So when I go through the video when I go to the textbook with you in the videos, I always explain why we are leaving out certain sections and how they contribute towards what, or how certain sections also contributes towards the exam. So try to utilize the videos as much as possible because it sifts out some of the things that you don't have to spend too much time worrying about. Are there any questions?
No, we can proceed.
All right. So if there are no questions, we can end here today. Please take note of the timetable. Please make sure that you take note of the timetable. And remember, our next class is going to be on the 10th. Remember, we're having that class to go through quiz 1 as well. So please take note of the timetable and the times that are going to be having that class as well. All right. If there are no questions, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.